Hello, this is Julia Davis of Yoga Teachers Forum, and I'm here today with Sarah Rose Bright, sex, pleasure and intimacy coach, to talk about erotic yoga for self-pleasure. Hi Sarah, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. I love to start these conversations by asking about your yoga journey. So where did yoga begin for you, Sarah?
So yoga began for me in my early 20s, so 25 odd years ago now. And it's been on and off ever since. But, you know, the last few years, it's been a foundational practice and something I turn to pretty much every single day, actually, even if it's just for 5-10 minutes. It's just weaved into my life so deeply now.
So what does your daily practice look like? Is it different every day? Do you have some things that you always love to do?
I love to get up and do some sun salutations just as a way to get the body open and stretched. And to be honest, my practices, I mean, I think my favorite yoga is absolutely yin yoga, because I think it's such a beautiful counterbalance to the busy life that I have. And I think that's the same for many people, and having that real yin practice. So sometimes it's just like lying on my bolster with my pelvis in the air and just lying there for a few minutes. It can be just as simple as that. But you know, I often go to classes as well, but it's just those, for me, it's those few minutes that I pepper the day with, that really just make a difference. Or just trusting my body. You know, you just learn so many postures over the years of what feels good in the moment, and just enjoying and allowing that.
Lovely. And how did you come to be working in the world of sex and intimacy?
So in my 20s, I had just realized how many problems I had in this area of my life. So I felt such shame around being a sexual being, shame around the thoughts I was having, didn't like my body, didn't know what I wanted, didn't know how to ask for it, even if I did. And just the whole sex just was a terrifying thing for me after trauma in my teenage years and lack of education, all sorts of different things. And so, it just became clear I had to do something about this. And also, you know, very much as a people pleaser, my pleasure was about the other person. It wasn't about anything I wasn't in the picture in that way. And so I just set on this journey of discovery, which has just been so incredible. And, you know, 15 years later, here I am, and this is my full-time work. So.
And where did you find the link between working with sexual pleasure and the practice and teaching of yoga?
Well, it's funny because, you know, I remember sort of in my 20s feeling aroused in my yoga sessions, but thinking there was something wrong with me because that shouldn't happen in yoga. Because in our culture, our sexuality isn't integrated. It's sort of something we switch on and off. And if we're able to even switch it on. And so for me, exploring the practice, and we don't have a culture of practice when it comes to sex. You know, we're just expected to know what happens and just to do it automatically and telepathically and all these things with no communication. And so for me, how do we practice being a sexual being? What are the skills that we need? How do we be present? All of these different things. So much of what we do in yoga is 100% transferable to our sexual experience. The mindfulness, the breathing, the slowing down, the listening to our bodies. And the amount of people that I've worked with, many yoga teachers actually, as well as yoga students, and when we talk about this, they're like, oh, wow, I never imagined how relevant all of this was to my yoga practice and for my sexual practice as well. So the two are so interlinked in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because there's also in yoga that whole feeling of sensuality that we have, and then there's a fear around using words around our own bodies. So the idea of talking about thighs and muscles feels easier for many teachers than talking about breasts and wombs and vaginas and clitorises, but they're parts of our body that it's important to talk about in our practice.
Absolutely. So, and they're missing in so much of our lives. You know, the amount of women I work with who don't have a name for their own genitals, And if we don't have a name for this part of our bodies, it's going to become more and more invisible and disconnected. And so but we need to have something that we feel comfortable with as well. And it's so refreshing when I sort of meet teachers like you who do feel comfortable to bring this in and bring the whole of us into the room. And I think we don't know how to be with our sexual selves without, the expectation is if we feel aroused, we must do something with it. And actually, really there's no difference on one level between our genitals and our shoulders. They're just body parts.
Yeah.
But because of our upbringing, our education or lack of, and all these things, they become something that we can feel awkward and uncomfortable around. I certainly did when I started this work. I couldn't say anything without blushing and feeling awkward.
Yeah. I'd like to talk for a moment to the title of the workshop that you're going to be leading for us, because there's a lot in there. There's erotic yoga, and then there's self-pleasure. I'd like to talk to the beginning section. So the erotic yoga, because I've been doing a lot of work around sexual misconduct in yoga and the abuse of women in yoga. And for some women, that word erotic yoga could even be triggering.
Yes. Yeah, for
so
sure.
The intention behind creating this workshop is a really positive one. So would you maybe be able to speak to that and the difference between this kind of erotic yoga where the word is labeled and we're here together, and the world of yoga that we're living in today?
Absolutely. So, I mean, so the erotic yoga came from how do we bring the principles of yoga to our sexual selves and our sexual practice. So, and it's all the things like the breathing and the mindfulness, but it's also that we just commit to showing up to this part of ourselves, like we commit to the yoga mat. And yoga meaning, the union of mind, body, spirit. And, for me, I want the union of mind, body, spirit in my sex life as well, and in my erotic life. And what happened was I was doing a lot of workshops where I was doing teaching and then sharing practices that would help women to connect to their bodies. And I was then at a friend's house doing a workshop, and she was a Kundalini yoga teacher, and she had all her Kundalini yoga mats laid out for the Kundalini session. And it just came to me, why don't I run these sessions where we just focus on the practices, doesn't the teaching sort of secondary, and just like we show up on the yoga mat to practice our postures, we can show up on the yoga mat and practice connecting to our bodies. So this isn't yoga in terms of a series of postures. It's around really connecting to our sexual vitality, which so many women feel disconnected from for many, many different reasons. Or the amount of women that say to me, I can't feel anything, or I don't feel any desire, all of these different things. Now, the word erotic I chose because erotic is much more than just sex. Eros is the life force energy that's around in everything. So much in Tantra, they say, every moment has the potential to be orgasmic and erotic. So that might be eating a delicious pear or having an amazing conversation. So not just having an intimate moment. And so that's where the word erotic yoga has come from. But I can totally understand with so much happening in the whole of the Me Too movement throughout the world in the last few years, which has given so many women space and permission and support to speak up. And, the amount of misconduct that's coming out, not just in yoga, but throughout so many different fields is astonishing. But also on one level astonishing, but also another level, not surprising, unfortunately. And it's brilliant that it's all coming out. So I can totally appreciate that if somebody might be triggered by that. And I get that with my work in general, because sex can be a very triggering topic because of all of this. But one of the feedbacks that I get a lot is how much I create a safe space. And that is so important to me in my work, because I never know who's going to be in the group and the history that they have. And so creating a space of safety, confidentiality, all of these different things is super, super important. And there's no goal in any of my work or classes. It's about what feels okay for you today, and to respect that in yourself, and that would never be pushed or challenged in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's the difference between practicing in a yoga class and feeling that sensual sexualness and feeling shame around it, or not knowing what to do with it, or a male predator seeing it and pouncing on it.
Yeah.
And being in a safe space where we're explicitly naming the truth that some practices can feel really lovely,
yeah,
in the body, and could help us access our sensual well-being, our erotic selves, which is very, very different to the world of abuse. And because we're talking about this topic, I think it's really pertinent to talk about the sexual well-being of women in the yoga world, and the fact that there are resources available to women. If you look on the Yoga Teachers Forum website, we've got resources there for women who've experienced abuse in yoga, are looking to combat abuse in yoga, and are interested in that whole area. So we're not only giving everyone the opportunity to work with Sarah and experience what erotic yoga can be, but also the intention is to have a tool set around all of this.
Yeah.
So a key component of eradicating the abuse of women in yoga are practices like the practices that Sarah's going to be sharing, because that allows us to experience sensual yoga in a really beautiful, safe way. I just wanted to speak to that. Also,
wonderful.
This workshop is for women.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love for you to talk to who would be talking, who would feel comfortable entering this space, and who this space has been created for.
So for me, thank you. This space is, and that's really wonderful, the resources that you create in there for women in terms of misconduct in the yoga world. It's so brilliant that the conversations are happening around this. And so in terms of this space, it's for anyone who identifies as being a woman. For me, we have such a limited view sometimes of what being a woman is, that a woman should be in such a narrow definition. And for me, how we express ourselves as a woman can be as unique as our fingerprints. And there's just infinite possibilities and shades and colors of that. So I know, for example, we were talking about beforehand, so it doesn't matter what your sexual, whatever your sexual orientation is, you are absolutely welcome. I work with many women with different sexual orientations. Whatever your relationship model is, you are welcome. However you identify on the gender spectrum about being a woman, you are welcome. One of my teachers talks about the gender galaxy, because there's just, again, so many ranges of how people sort of self-identify. And so for me, I very much use my language, because again, I don't know who's going to be in the room, and I want people to feel comfortable in wherever they are, whatever they bring in terms of this. So absolutely welcome.
Okay, so this workshop is about self-pleasure as well. It's erotic yoga for self-pleasure. It's going to be conducted via the wonders of Zoom. So people will be in their own spaces when they practice. But what might that look like for them? Do they need to bolt their bedroom door and stay out for these 3 hours? What's the experience going to be like for them?
So we're going to have some sort of teachings and discussion, because it's important to set the scene about how we learn to do sex and how habitual we can be around it. So these are real skills that aren't going to just be for your self pleasure, but also can empower you in partner experiences as well. And so ideally, you would like, it'd be great if you're in a space which feels totally private. The practices are gentle practices. So the practices are all with clothes on. And then, but you may be at home with children or partners or people staying, different things. So my advice would be to, if you feel, is to have headphones with you so that you can listen to it in private if you're worried anyone's going to be listening. And if you've got a space where you can shut the door, that's amazing. But know that if somebody does, children do burst in, you're not going to be sort of in any uncompromising position. And, feel free to adapt it to so that you feel comfortable in the practices. That's really important.
So would you say that you need to have experience of anything in order to come? Can you kind of step in with an open mind, like, being a real beginner to everything?
100%. Yep, absolutely. But also, if you're someone who's explored some of this and you want to go deeper, then there's opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too, because one of the reasons why you're invited in the kind of world of Yoga Teachers Forum to come and share with us is that this is a learning opportunity for teachers. It's a learning opportunity for touching something that is really beautiful in our bodies that absolutely translates to ourselves as yoga teachers. So come along if you are not a yoga teacher, and if you identify as being a woman. Come along if you are a yoga teacher and you identify as being a woman. We also have ways in which you can learn more about women's bodies and how to be safe with them if you don't identify as a woman. But this isn't a space for that. This is a space for the exploration for women of erotic yoga. So is there anything else that you'd like to mention to let people know what it might feel like to be in the space with you on the 14th of September?
Well, also, we're going to have a lot of fun, because for many people, this area can feel awkward or a little bit uncomfortable. And I promise you that if that's you, you will not be the only one in the session, 100%. And the amount of time people say to me, oh my gosh, that's just been, I just feel so relieved to have had that session. It just feels so wonderful to just experience talking about this in a really healthy and natural way. And I can really feel things in my body that I didn't think were there, or there can be all sorts of revelations happen. So it's such on one level a simple space, but I've had so many people have such profound experiences with it. And so if you're feeling a bit scared or a bit nervous, everyone always says to me afterwards, I'm so glad I gave myself that stretch. I just, I really don't regret it. And I also, just to say, for yoga teachers particularly, because I've had a number of yoga teachers, especially when they're working with women and maybe working with women in a one-to-one way as well as in a group way, where again, it's just to help them to, if we feel uncomfortable and awkward about this area, that can translate and transmit. And so again, it's just helped them to feel more relaxed, to maybe ask questions that they couldn't, or be more comfortable if something was raised with them. So it can also help from a professional development aspect, as well as just benefiting your life and your pleasure. But also, if you don't feel comfortable if you feel totally comfortable about sex, I promise you there's always more to learn. I've been doing this work for 15 years. And just like your yoga practice deepens and deepens, so can your sexual practice. So I really invite you all along.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love the sensual aspect of my yoga practice. It's one of the things I love most. And the idea of spending more time working with that is amazing. And there are just things like, if you're a woman who has a menstrual cycle, there are times where your breasts are bigger, there are times where your breasts are smaller, there are times where your breasts feel fabulous, there are times where your breasts feel sensitive and go away. There are times when our wounds are smaller or larger, we feel like being touched or feel like not being touched. And that happens throughout our cycle. Or we can be experiencing perimenopause and menopause and have all the bodily things that go on with that too. And that feeds into our sexual energy and the way our bodies feel. And I really feel that it's our responsibility as yoga teachers to respect that in the people that walk into our studios.
Yeah.
And we're going to be much better equipped to do that if we've experienced the type of work that you'll be sharing in your workshop. So this workshop that is happening in September is going to take place on Monday, the 14th of September from 1 till 4 via Zoom. It is absolutely my intention to continue to work with Sarah. So if that's a date that you can't attend, let us know, and keep an eye on what we'll be sharing through the forum for other opportunities to be with Sarah and really work with an explicit context for our bodies and our sexuality and our eroticism, and know that having that knowledge and experiencing that pleasure for ourselves can only benefit our personal practice and our teaching. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me today. Apologies if there are any noises around that people were hearing. Hopefully you heard us both as clearly as you possibly could. And what we'll do is we'll put in the notes as well where you can find this workshop and where you can find Sarah. Any final words for us, Sarah?
So 2 things. Yeah, first of all, if you have any questions about the workshop at all, please get in touch, because it might be, oh, I'm not sure about it because of this, or whatever it is, or this is my intent, will it meet it? Please do get in touch, because happy to answer any questions. And also, just to expand on what you finished with so beautifully, Julia, that this is, for your personal practice, your teaching, but also for your life. And, so time and time again, when people really dive into this area, the benefits that ripple out in terms of their confidence, their creativity, more healthy relationships, their vitality, all sorts of different benefits I see time and time again. So if this is an area, I would just really encourage you, whether it's with me or with anywhere else, to really, it's such a gift, this aspect of your life. It really is the gift that keeps on giving when we dive in and embrace it.
Thank you so much.
And I look forward to sharing it. Yeah.
On the 14th of September.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.